Hello and welcome to Devastating Opinions. My name is Dev, and this is my review of the Super Mario Bros. Movie. Not to be confused with Super Mario Bros., the movie, which came out in 1993. This is the Super Mario Bros. Movie that came out in 2023, 30 years later. That movie in question was a financial and critical disaster and was so bad that it took Nintendo 30 years for them to decide, hey, we should probably give this another try. Now, I will admit, I personally love this movie. I think it is an absolute train wreck in the best way. It is hilariously awful, one of the best so bad it's good movies ever, but yeah, it definitely did set a bad precedent for video game movies. In this new attempt to make a Mario movie, they have decided to make it animated, which is probably a good idea. However, Illumination, the bane of modern-day animation studios. This studio has an absolutely horrible track record, and I genuinely did not have any faith whatsoever that they would be able to pull off a Mario movie, or at least pull it off in a way that would be satisfying. And top that off with a very polarizing voice cast, which has been memed to death. Let's just say I was not really excited to see what Illumination had to offer. And now that I've seen it, I can't necessarily call it a great movie. I don't even know if I could call it a good movie, but I certainly enjoyed it a lot more than I thought I would. The Super Mario Bros. Movie is a love letter to the franchise, and while it's not a great movie, and while it definitely has its issues, it definitely didn't annoy me like I was expecting it would. There's enough in this movie that I think most Mario fans will be pretty satisfied with, and it's definitely a fun family movie and a fun kids movie. If you're expecting anything more than that, then this is definitely not going to be for you. I would actually compare it a lot to the Sonic movies that came out recently. Those movies are not great by any stretch of the imagination either, but they do work well for what they're trying to do, and they are good movies for the fans, and that's basically what this movie is as well. This is easily Illumination's best looking movie to date. And when I say that, I'm not just talking about the animation. There are a lot of whimsical and fun and exciting scenes in this movie that in a typical Illumination movie would be very standard, very boring, very flat. But this movie really does have a vibrance and a life to it. You can tell they really put a lot more effort into this than they typically do. There's a lot of great attention to detail. There are a lot of really cool references, things that are just in the background, things that you wouldn't even have noticed. I wouldn't say the references are a detriment like they are in something like Ready Player One or Chip and Dale or Space Jam 2, but the references do make up a lot of the movie's substance, I will admit that. Thankfully, the references are not just blatant and obvious, they do utilize them for interesting scenes in the movie. The musical score was fantastic. Typically, I'm not a huge fan of Brian Tyler's musical scores, but what he was able to do, reworking a lot of original themes from Mario games and implementing them into this movie score, I think it works really well and really adds to the movie. To be honest, I probably would not like this movie nearly as much if the music did not go as hard as it does. And now let's talk about the voice acting, because that's certainly a hot topic. Charlie Day as Luigi, I thought was pretty great. He worked very well for that character, and I never really saw him as Charlie Day. I felt like he fit the character of Luigi very well. Jack Black as Bowser was also a very fun highlight. He definitely nailed the personality of the character. He's probably the best casting choice that this movie had. Anya Taylor-Joy as Peach was okay. This is her first voice acting role, if I'm correct on that, and you can kind of tell at times. But as the movie goes on, her character and her voice performance get a lot better. Keegan-Michael Key was fine as Toad. I think his voice was pitched up more from the trailer. His voice worked a lot better here than in the trailer, in my opinion. Seth Rogen as Donkey Kong was... I mean, he was just kind of doing Seth Rogen voice. He wasn't really trying to be a character, he was just being Seth Rogen. And yeah, I honestly kind of found it very distracting and annoying. Fred Armisen is also a very strange choice to play Cranky Kong. I think his vocal performance and his character in general were just really misused. And then there's Chris Pratt, who is fine. He's not awful, he's not great, he's perfectly serviceable. The voice that he was putting on in the trailer,
Mushroom Kingdom Here we come!
That voice is not the voice he talks in throughout this movie, which is a huge relief. If he had talked like that the entire movie, I would have blown my brains out. I do have like a weird, probably not true fan theory that maybe they released the trailer and everyone clowned on Chris Pratt's voice so much that they made him re-record his lines. I have no evidence to back that up, so it's probably not true, but it would be hilarious if it was. But yeah, he does that voice like once at the beginning and like maybe 1 or 2 times throughout the movie, but he talks like Chris Pratt throughout the rest of the movie with maybe a slight Italian accent. It's nothing special, it's nothing great, it's just whatever. So this movie is not necessarily super engrossing, but I did have a smile on my face for pretty much the majority of the movie. I loved seeing all these classic Mario things like images and sounds from the games be utilized in this story in a somewhat clever and interesting way. I will say, if this movie was not a Mario movie, I don't think I would care nearly as much. This movie does kind of rely on that Mario nostalgia. Thankfully, I do have that Mario nostalgia, so that definitely enhanced my experience, but it will definitely hinder the experience for anyone who doesn't. As far as some of my favorite scenes in the movie, I actually really enjoyed a lot of the stuff in Brooklyn in the beginning of the movie. I love the dynamic between Mario and Luigi, which makes it all the more disappointing when Mario and Luigi get split up for the rest of the movie. I would actually say I really enjoyed the first 30 minutes of the movie. Them getting to the Mushroom Kingdom and the whole Luigi's Mansion-esque scene was really fun. The obstacle course scene with Mario and Peach was really fun as well. To be honest, the movie actually starts to lose me once we get to the Donkey Kong scene. The introduction of Cranky Kong and Donkey Kong and this whole arena scene really just didn't do much for me. It has some of the worst humor in the movie, and like I said already, Seth Rogen and Fred Armisen's voice acting really kind of grated on me. The Mario Kart scene is obviously the standout moment. It's visually exciting. There's a lot of creative choices that they make with the animation that I really appreciated. I also really enjoyed the final battle at the end. I think that might be my favorite part of the movie. The way the music swells together and everything comes together at the end when they finally take on Bowser. I think it works really, really well. Now, that being said, I do feel like the pacing of this movie is a bit off. I think it actually moves way too fast. On one hand, I do appreciate that this movie doesn't pad the runtime with a lot of BS filler, but at the same time, the plot lines that they introduce in this movie feel rushed and thrown together as a result of the movie just kind of moving at 1,000 miles per hour and not really having time to breathe and get to know these characters. There's a plot line in this movie where Mario's parents think he's like a disappointment. This plot line is not mentioned much at all throughout the rest of the movie until the end. It honestly feels like it could have just been taken out entirely. As for my other issues with the movie, it is still an Illumination movie, so that means that it has its Illumination trademarks. Thankfully, they're not nearly as obnoxious as they typically are with the obnoxious, like, random humor that they randomly throw in their stupid movies. A lot of the humor does kind of fall flat. There are a few really funny jokes. I really like the Luma that's in the cage that made very nihilistic quotes. That was really funny. My biggest issue with this movie is why on God's earth do they think that it is necessary to play an 80s rock song in the middle of an interesting action scene? They do it like 10 times in this movie. Every single time an 80s rock song started playing, I immediately rolled my eyes and was annoyed. Why not just have an original score song play during this sequence? That would make these scenes so much better. I would totally enjoy the obstacle course scene with Mario and Peach so much more if I Need a Hero wasn't playing during it. Why does Take On Me start playing during one of the kart race scenes? No matter how much you love this movie, I don't think a single person is going to come out of this movie and say, you know, I really liked the use of the 80s rock songs in this Mario movie. And yeah, that's the Mario movie. It's not anything groundbreaking. It's not an awful disaster like the 93 movie. It's not nearly as bad as I was expecting it to be, considering its Illumination, but there's nothing really about it that's super memorable outside of the music, and most of the music is just reworked from the games. I really like how they honored the Mario legacy and brought in as many many references as possible and utilized the musical themes and all the characters and stayed true to how they are in the games. But to be honest, by the end of the movie, all I really wanted to do was just play Mario games, which, you know, if that was the intention, then mission accomplished, Nintendo. But when it comes down to it, I'm gonna play Mario 64, Mario Galaxy, Mario Sunshine, Mario Odyssey, Paper Mario games, the Mario and Luigi games. I'm gonna play all those games again 1 billion times over, and I probably won't be watching this movie very often. And I would just like everyone watching to keep in mind that you can like this movie if you want. You don't have to rely on critics to make your decisions for you. You can just like a movie. You can even like a movie and acknowledge it's not great. I like this movie, but I acknowledge it's not great. I love the 93 movie, but I think that's a giant pile of shit. Maybe stop seeking validation and just make your own opinions. Utilize film criticism and movie reviews as a discussion point. Look at what people liked about the movie, look at what people didn't like about the movie, and compare that to your experience and join the discussion without being hateful and criticizing people just because their opinion is different than yours. It's funny how everyone goes apeshit crazy over Rotten Tomatoes when they disagree with the preconceived notion of a movie. Just keep in mind, people were already pissed off about that score before the movie even came out. So yeah, don't seek validation through criticism. Formulate your own opinions and join the conversation. And don't put other people down because they had a different opinion than you. And with that being said, I would give the Super Mario Bros. Movie a 6 out of 10. It was originally a 5, but I actually watched it again over the weekend, and I enjoyed it a little bit more on the second watch, so I will give it a definitive 6 out of 10. So yeah, that's my opinion. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to like the video or leave a comment. You can disregard everything I just said and call me an idiot for not liking this movie as much as you did, or give me some calm, constructive criticism instead. I'm still learning my process, so any constructive criticism is appreciated. Or if you want to call me a big dummy head, then that is certainly within your right, and I'll only cry a little bit. Also, feel free to subscribe if you enjoyed. I'll be talking about more movies soon. This has been Devastating Opinions. My name is Dev, and I will see you all later. Wahoo! Mushroom Kingdom, here we come.